One of the things that economists do is deal with data, because data tells us about the real world. Now, why is that important? Well, if you're sitting in the ivory tower, then you want to be able to build theories and explanations about the real world, particularly in economics. And so in a way, the data that we can assess and look at is a test of how well we're doing in theory and building frameworks for explanation. Now, Japan's a great example. Let's have a little look at it. The first graph here is showing us the Japanese government fiscal position, its deficit. In the late 1980s, Japan had a huge credit boom, and that fueled the property markets. And in the early 90s, the property markets collapsed, and from then on, Japan has run very large fiscal deficits. And the reason we talk about Japan is because it has pushed the policy parameters to relative extremes. Now, as part of the running the deficits, they also built up a lot of debt, as you can see in the next graph. And the economics that's taught in most universities around the world, and the economics that you read in the paper and watch on TV in finance reports, etc., the economists were all saying that Japan would seriously struggle with these policy extremes. The debt would become too large and the investors would stop lending the Japanese government money, and that the deficits would squeeze interest rates up, and we'll explain that in more detail later. And also, the other part of the story was that the Bank of Japan, which is Japan's central bank, was also buying a lot of that increasing debt and holds about 45% of all government debt now. So it's sort of the government buying its own debt. And economists of the mainstream variety also said that's taboo, and that would drive inflation and risk hyperinflation. And this is the sort of predictions that come out of learning mainstream economics. And so the reality check is what actually happened. And here you can see that inflation has been extremely low for 30 years. Interest rates have been near zero for 25 years. Bond yields have been steadily falling, and in some cases now they're negative. Now, what does that mean? Well, an economic framework has to be able to explain that reality. And the mainstream economic approach can't possibly understand that. Its predictions are systematically wrong all the time when we're dealing with, say, that data set. And so what we'll do in this course is be building up a body of explanation that can embrace the real world. That's the use of MMTed.